We're live, I think. Are we live? I don't know. I don't know if we're live. All right, can you guys see me yet? Wait, let me pull up my YouTube channel so I can see if we're live. Let's see here. It's weird because it's very quiet in my house, but I suspect my voice is coming through, and I hope so anyway. Let's see. Live stream. Live stream. I want to see if I can see it. You can see and hear me. Is there an echo? Ooh, I hope there's not an echo. Let's see if that's just a one-time thing. Is it a lot of echoing? Hold on. Technology, you know? Technology. Yeah, let me know if anyone else is getting an echo. I'm looking at OBS. I'll see if I can figure out why that's happening. I've got one mic active. This other mic, we'll get to this page in a second. Just me for now. Troubleshooting. No echo here, no echo, no echo. Okay, that's really weird. I wonder if you refresh the page then, whoever is experiencing an echo, I hope it's only one person actually, but yeah, just refresh the page. Hopefully that fixes it. Let me know. I'll try to keep an eye on the chat. I have no LaCroix. I gave my last LaCroix to my wife, so I have a coffee and I have water. So I hope you have something to drink as well, but this is what I have. So I'll be switching between them periodically. Some good water. All right. So I wanted to give people just a few minutes to join because these things never really start truly on time. People are always showing up. But I know I'm going to give us a quick hint. Today we're talking about maps. That might have already been obvious, but how to make a map for a 5th edition D&D adventure, especially one that you might intend to publish, because what we're trying to do with this adventure writing series is write something that would be up to par for perhaps publishing on DM's Guild or through your own avenues, and really taking this idea from nothing to a fully realized one-shot. And I'm doing all of this live. Every time we do this, I have not pre-planned. All I have done is maybe look back through our notes a little bit just before, like maybe an hour before we start, so I can refresh my memory. But I want to show you guys how I do this process because I think there's this illusion or this idea that people just sit down and like slap out an adventure and it's awesome and they don't have to struggle and they never hit any roadblocks. And I mean, that might be true for some people, but it's definitely not true for me. And I'm a professional D&D publisher, and this is what I do as my job. And so I think that by showing people this process and helping guide through it, it might not only make you more confident that you can do it too, especially if you follow along and do this, you know, step by step as we do it. But I think it might show you that it's just, you know, maybe it's not as big of a deal as some people make it, I guess. Once you see that it's just a matter of working at it in an organized fashion until it's done and that there's a process you can follow, I think that you might see that you yourself could just as easily write an adventure as anybody. Okay, sip of coffee. Let's see how we're doing on people showing up. I think we'll probably get started in a second here. All right, this is an official live stream without a LaCroix. That's right, I gave it to my wife because I'm nice. We had one left. But okay, well, everybody, here we go. Let's jump in. I'm going to keep an eye on the chat, and I want this to be a little bit of a dialogue. So if you have questions, we will try to answer them. I'm going to try to address your questions as we go. And DP, yes, thank you for asking. Let's start with a quick recap about part 1 and part 2. So in fact, I'm going to pull my notes up on those so that we can very specifically talk about what we did. All right. So for our adventure writing, the very first one that we did, part 1, which you can go back and check out on the channel, there's going to be a playlist with all of these in order. But the very first one that we did was actually how simply to find an idea. which is it's a whole process unto itself, because coming up with a few ideas and then deciding which one to move forward with, which one gives you the most to work with right off the bat, is an important part of this process. And especially when you are writing adventures frequently, whether it's because you're a game master and you have a weekly game and you are running a homebrew thing, or because you're publishing professionally, you can't always wait around for the muse, right? So we were talking about some tricks in the first one about how to generate ideas, and we used the Tome of Adventure Design, which is one of my very favorite books by Matt Finch, Frog God Games. And we had come up with the idea after some roll tables of Bone Pavilion of the Shadow Hounds. So after some thinking about what a broad look at that kind of adventure would be, we settled on that as our idea. So then, after that, we moved on to part 2. That was our most recent live stream, and that was where we talked about how to outline an adventure. And so we're still pretty high level at that stage, and we're talking about how you can come up with hooks, what different encounter types are that you might want to touch on in the adventure. We talked a little bit about scope, like how long is the adventure? In our case, a one-shot, and so it's going to be 3 to 5 hours long with between 6 to 8 encounters generally is what a one-shot is. And we had even talked about some tricks that I use in particular for coming up with some encounter ideas to add to our outline. And one of the most important tricks that I absolutely love using is trying to come up with encounters specifically geared toward each of the major character class types. So if you want to see how we do that process and download the notes and all that, go check out number 2. But what we had done in the last one was come up with a pretty solid outline that had a variety of different encounter types, and our goal was to make sure that we had a good cadence, so it wasn't just combats or just puzzles or just NPC interactions, especially not all in a row. So that was where we were talking a little bit about like cadence-based design. And now today we're going to do the next step of making a map to fit along with this outline. So let's see here. I want to pull up a new page. We're gonna switch screens over to here. I hope you guys can see this now. So you can see that we have a couple things pulled up. Now I have our notes. I put a teeny bit in there to get us started, which we'll just kick off into. And then you see that there's this blank gray area, which is an online drawing tool. And I've never used it because I usually draw on pen and paper. So we'll see how this goes. But I am no artist, and I hope that I can at least try to communicate what some of our ideas are to you using this method. So let's see what we get. All right. So starting off here. Writing a one-shot designing maps for Bone Pavilion of the Shadow Hounds. I want to highlight this question here that I put down because this is actually one of the most difficult things to decide, which is, do we come up with our encounters and adventure outline and really go deep on that first, or do we try to draw the map first and then fit the encounters to that? So you guys have seen we already have done some outlining, and I actually put that down here so we can refer to it. This is our adventure outline from our last live stream. And, we've got the hook, we had a puzzle actually, some navigation stuff, some NPC interaction. So we'll touch back on all of that. But you can see already that at least my process is I like to sort of develop a bit of an outline before I really go deep on the map, because I personally think it's very, very difficult to write an adventure to an already existing map. But at the same time, it's almost impossible to write an adventure without some semblance of a map in your mind. So I personally think that you have to do the map and the adventure sort of in tandem, and they happen together early on in the process. And as you write, you're going to be adjusting a little bit about the encounters. Maybe you'll get a really cool idea that you want to put in, and so you'll have to change things up a little bit. And then at the same time, you have a kind of a broad idea of what the map's going to look like, and you're refining it as you're writing, and you're kind of locking it in as you write. And that gives you the most flexibility. And I think that that is a best practice, because you're not going to get locked into something that the map dictates. If you have a pre-made map and you're trying to write to that map, I mean, it's going to be it's probably going to impact your pacing. And we have gone to effort to make sure that our pacing is pretty good when we're doing this cadence-based outline. And we don't want to have the map throw that off by forcing us to write certain rooms in a certain order, or like causing one thing we were planning to have to be too close to the other thing. So I really, really strongly encourage people to try to do this tandem style development to get the most kind of control over what you're writing. That said, I have totally written adventures for pre-made maps, and I've written adventures that had almost no map until I was close to the end, especially adventures that are more events based. However, this one shot we're writing is a pretty classic location based adventure, and for that it's gonna need a map. Even if we're just doing theater of the mind, you still need to visualize how the space looks in order to write effectively and to really see something in your own mind to communicate to the reader. Even if you don't end up including a map, if you want to do purely theater of the mind, that's totally cool too. But you have to know the space. And until you know the space that you're writing about, you probably might even feel a little stuck. Where I've run into that before, where I was actually writing a 20th level adventure called Fires of Isk, and I did not have a strong visualization of what the area looked like. It was this big volcano with like multiple levels in it, and like Azers lived inside, and it was a complex environment, and I ended up having to draw tons and tons of doodles and maps just to get my mind square with how that space looked. And once I did that, writing the adventure came much more easily. But I was feeling stuck at various points in writing that because I didn't know what I was trying to communicate. I didn't really see it strongly in my own mind, and that will stymie you, and you don't want that. So, all right, now let's see, what can we jump into here? Back to our notes. So the age-old question here, I'm gonna actually put an answer in our notes, which is develop both at the same time. Tandem. All right, now brainstorming for the map. Here we go. What I like to do when I'm jumping into a map is, again, know some of our encounters, which we've got down here. But then I like to do a little bit more just general brainstorming about room ideas for what we might expect to find in this location we're developing. And then some thematic ideas too, like, you know, what is it gonna look and feel like? You know, what is the environmental vibe of this area? And let's see here. I know we had talked last time about how we wanted to pitch the Bone Pavilion of the Shadow Hounds as muddy, swampy even. We had talked about maybe having like roots, leaves, rot. And those are all ideas that are thematic. So we want to note these down because we're going to come back to this when we're drawing, designing rooms, describing rooms, all of that. So I don't know. Do you guys have any other ideas for what might be some thematic elements of something that is the Bone Pavilion of the Shadow Hounds? I was thinking, mangroves. I know we had been talking a little bit of like Florida, like mangrove style, swamp style elements to it. So you guys, if you think of anything, let me know. And I'm going to keep kind of plonking away at this for a second here. So what are some more thematic ideas we have? I mean, obviously bones, skeletons. Bones, we came up with it at the same time, DP. Other things that we want to work into this. I mean, I think that a sense of darkness and humidity. Oh, mushrooms. Good one, Scott. Yeah, mushrooms, like fungus. What are the walls made of? What are the walls? I sort of, in my mind, imagine them to be like packed mud or dirt with roots coming through. Dirt with a U. With roots. Fetid mists. Oh, that's fancy. Yes, definitely. Stinky mists for sure. That's a cool one. So these are all thematic elements. Bayou style. Yeah, bayou looking, dripping vines and, murky water. Yes, humidity. That's a good one for sure. Heavy air, right? Heavy air, strong smells in the air. Dripping ooze. Hey, Patrick. Oh my gosh, Patrick Dummers is here. Yeah. Oh, insects and buzzing sounds. That's a great one. Insects and buzzing sounds. I'm gonna highlight that one because that's a sound, which is a sense that we don't want to forget to include. You know, we have strong smells, of course, and I think a lot of people recommend writing with the five senses in mind, and I do agree with that, but I also think that it can become too formulaic if you try to write a five sense element for literally like every room possible. I personally, for the sake of brevity and impact, what I like to do is to choose the most impactful sense of the room to emphasize. You know, maybe one or two, but hitting all five senses with every room can kind of start to become like a eye glazy type situation. Anyone who's owned a dog knows they go along with fetidness. It's very true. I'm learning that myself now. We have a 6-month-old puppy. Abandoned. Yes. Oh, gurgling, totems. Wow, curling, gurgling. So we have a lot. Oh, corpses floating in the water. That's awesome. And here's why I love that one. I know it doesn't seem like we're working on the map right now, but we are, and I promise we'll get back to why this matters. But corpses floating in the water is really good because it is evocative. And I'm assuming, just like me, that a lot of you got an image in your mind instantly of what that looked like. And notice how it didn't even need any like descriptive words, like no adjectives. We didn't have to say like bloated corpses or like, you know, stinky corpses. Just saying corpses floating in the water conjures a very strong image. And that's the best kind of writing because it's punchy and it's impactful and the reader immediately sees something in their mind. So the reason we're putting in so much effort right now with some brainstorming of room and thematic ideas is because the map is going to need to communicate visions to the dungeon master and the players. Like, it's gonna have to communicate the space, and so we need a strong grasp and we need these strong images in our head so we can share it out to the dungeon master. So, frogs and toads. Okay, we'll put that as our last one for now. I think we got a lot of, like, enormous amount of excellent thematic ideas. And now, a little bit on room ideas. So this one, we're gonna pull a bit from our outline. So we had been talking last time about our general outline, and I remember mentioning, and it's worth reiterating, that this adventure is not going to be the proverbial cattle slide, aka it's not going to definitely be going from the first encounter to the last one in sequence. You know, we can't assume that it's going to be just like a railroad track all the way through, the proverbial railroad track. We're just assuming a most likely path through the map. So that's why we have this outline. But let's look at this for some ideas. So let's say, okay, so the first room that we're talking about is something to do with the skeleton door. And we want this to be a puzzle that the cleric can have an impact on. So I think that a room, like, we're going to have an entrance room. Entrance room. What else are we going to have? It looks like our next idea is a pit of bone spikes. So this is probably going to be in some kind of impassable area, right? Like a hallway or a small room that really puts that pit front and center and makes it difficult to you know, simply skip over. So I'm going to say some kind of narrow hallway with pit. All right, other room ideas. Well, our next room, or one of our next ones, is going to be an NPC who is injured from the pit trap, as we can see here in our outline, but we don't know if that means they're in the pit trap or not. I don't know. What do you guys think? It might be fun to have that person have crawled like into another room and is sort of laying there like, help me. I wonder. I don't have an idea for that room yet. Nope. I don't have one yet. So we'll come back to it. Okay. More room ideas. A combat. A fight with the hounds around a shattered altar. So we're definitely going to have some kind of like esoteric altar room, magical, and I think we also want it to be large because we're gonna have a combat in there, a sort of a set piece. And so you want exciting like set piece fights to be in rooms with a little bit more space to breathe. If it's in just like a 30 by 30 foot room, it's basically just going to be like two walls of player characters and monsters like clashing in the center and swing until someone goes down. So a little bit of dynamism in the room by making it larger can add a lot of tactical variety, and we want that for these kinds of fights. So that's why we plan. Okay. Next, navigation to the offering room. So mangroves, underground, muddy, 3 paths. So we're gonna have to make some kind of network, like hallway network. Some kind of maze almost. Ooh, the Trial of Blood with the dead adventurers scattered everywhere. Are you reading the adventure I'm writing? I'm writing an adventure right now with something similar to that. That's so cool. A sunken altar room. I like that idea. Suggested the altar be sunken, and I'm gonna add that here because that is the opposite of what I was at first thinking. You normally think altars are like raised up and they're special and they're on high, but wouldn't it be cool if in a dungeon where we're dealing with like murky water and bog type stuff, if the altar was actually like lower and we had to deal with maybe a water hazard or something? That's a great idea. Okay, so then we have another fight room, another kind of boss battle situation. So we're gonna say another boss battle room. And I think that this one needs to be like really cool looking. Like it should have like bones in the walls, roots. And I remember that we had talked about that there was going to be a bad person who upset the hounds. So I feel like this final room might even be more of the den of the hounds. So I would say den-like, where we're going to actually encounter a fair number of the hounds and whoever their current keeper is. Oh, mud golems. That's a cool idea. That's really neat. Mud golems. I like that. Let's note that down here because mud golems, we could use that for something. Maybe mud golems could be some kind of hazard or combat enemy. I know because, so this is where we also run into the tricky part of when we're designing our map. We have a certain number of combats that we are limited to including if we want this to stay within the time frame. If we want it to definitely be a one-shot, 3 to 5 hours, we have to be judicious about which fights we're going to include, since they tend to take probably the most time out of any kind of typical encounter. Unless your players are like mine and they spend longer crossing pit traps than they do fighting monsters. The elaborate plans required to cross a pit trap would boggle your mind. So here we go. Okay. So we have some room ideas. We have some general pacing. We have some thematic ideas. Now it is time to start drawing. So now we got to start turning this into something that we can hold in our hands. So here we are. I'm going to jump back over here. I'm on this sketching page, and when I'm first drawing a dungeon map, this is just me, but I literally cannot draw straight onto grid paper. I can't do it. It's because I find the grid itself to be a little bit like, it sort of causes me to make a more geometric looking dungeon than might actually be necessary. Find myself like cleaving to like the grid lines and like making angular rooms instead of round ones. And it also like it forces you to try to make decisions about how big rooms are, like concrete decisions, before you should be needing to, like before we're ready. Because right now, when we're still at this outlining stage, we're not actually trying to like say, this is definitely a 30 by 30 foot room with 2 10-foot alcoves and a 5-foot hazard down the center. Like we're not at that stage yet. We're just trying to get the rough look of the map, because we're gonna be, again, writing and doing map together in tandem. And so there will be a step in the future where we are actually fine-tuning a combat, where we're looking at what makes a combat dynamic and interesting, and that includes the space. And you don't want to be set in those decisions too early. So the time will come, but it is not now. So let's just start making a broad sketch here. I'm going to refer back to our notes as we do this. All right, so we need an entrance room, and I'm just going to kind of draw a circle. Like we have like a pathway in from the surface, right? So I'm just going to draw kind of like a line here so we know we're talking about the surface. And maybe some stairs down, although we don't know if we're really going to have stairs per se. And this is the proverbial entering the mythical underground. What's that called again? Why can't I remember? The mythical underworld. Going underground is like a transitional moment in D&D that's actually kind of like sacred to... It's funny because it's actually like referred to as its own thing, where you're entering the mythical underground, and that's where suddenly the rules of normal reality are gone. And people implicitly accept that when they go down into a dungeon. So I think it's kind of like a cool concept. But all right, so we are going down and we're going to have an entrance room. Okay? I have no idea if it's actually going to turn out to be that big. But I don't think it's going to be as big as the other rooms that are like some of the more important rooms, right? So we're just going like relative size here. Just a general outline. Now, we have an entrance room. We know that at some point soon we're going to need some narrow hallways with a pit in it. So what I'm going to do here is kind of just draw like a line off. And I don't know how big or long this hallway is going to be yet, but this is going to be the pit hallway. Pit hallway. Right? Okay, we've got a pit hallway. Now, we have the altar room. That's probably going to be next-ish, but remember what I said about now making this adventure a cattle slide. It can't just be one room after another. We have to give the characters a little bit of a chance to like move around and explore, and some really important elements to that are having choices in taking different paths. So right off the bat, I think that we need to maybe have a split in the first room. And now what we're doing is we're developing ideas that fall outside of our outline a little bit, because we're actually going to be throwing a few extra rooms onto the map. We're not going to have just 6 to 8 rooms, one encounter. It needs to have a little bit of like pacing and room to breathe, and a few empty rooms are important, or rooms that don't have a lot going on in them. Like no room is truly empty, but you know, rooms that just have maybe a little bit of story information or hints at what's going on. And so that kind of keeps the characters guessing, you know, they don't just know that they're going to open the door right into another encounter of some kind. So I think tentatively I kind of want to split off in this direction. So we've got the pit here, and then we've got another room going off, and it's going to go somewhere, right? So here's that somewhere. What will it be? We don't totally know yet. And this pit room is also going to go somewhere. What will it be? We're not totally sure yet, once again. But we're starting to see a little bit of movement develop, a little bit of lines and circles. So we have other rooms to start to throw in here. We have the esoteric altar room, which is going to be one of the central combats, right? So we want a little bit of space between things for that one. So I'm going to say, okay, so that room is going to lead to something else. We don't really know what yet. And I think that this room is going to connect back to here. So we straight up don't know what any of these rooms are yet, right? We don't officially have these rooms planned. All we know for sure is that we have the entrance and the pit. So I'm going to put numbers by the rooms that we know we've kind of got on our outline already. Ooh, that was a bad number 2. 2, pit. Well, now what is all this stuff? What is it going to be? We don't totally know yet. I think that, you know, this is where we would then jump back to our cool thematic ideas, and maybe some of our room ideas too. Ribbon rooms. Oh, I'm looking at your guys' your cool commentary. Maybe we can pull some ideas. So here, I want to throw this back to the chat for those who might be watching. We have some rooms that we have to put some stuff in. And we don't want them to be like full-blown encounters necessarily, but we want to have some interesting things in them. So like, what are some other rooms that somebody would find in an evil haunted dog nest in a swamp, like in a bayou? You know, what are some fun things that we could find in there? One thing that I always like to do in an adventure is to include something that is referred to as a cat in a jar. And who came up with this? It might have been the DM's Guild writer MT Black I saw who first mentioned this concept, but I think it's really genius, where you always want to put at least one kind of like weird thing that's hard to explain in the dungeon that provokes the characters into checking it out. It's not an encounter necessarily, but it's something that makes them go, what is that? So that's why, a cat in a jar. Players walk into a room and they see a cat in a jar. Very likely that they're going to walk up to that and try to interact with it in some way. And interaction is what D&D is all about. It's all about the DM throwing something to the players and then them asking questions back and trying to figure out what's going on. And then the DM gives them a little bit more information. And then they decide to like open the jar and then it turns into like an evil displacer beast or something, So we want to encourage that back and forth between player and DM. It's not just, I tell you what's in the room, you guys do something, okay, next room. It's like, no, you spend some time exploring, messing with things. And our job as a designer is to make a map that has fun things to mess with, right? So here's some ideas. Oh, ribbon rooms in the chat. Clay jars filled with the ashes of other adventurers. That's really neat. Oh, I really like that idea. That's a great idea. So, okay, I'm going to one-up you there, and I'm going to say that this is actually like the mud jar room, right? Because ashes is great, but when you're in a swamp, anything that's ashy is going to actually be mud. So the mud jar room. Okay. So there's going to be cool jars in this room of some sort. And there's going to be some cool stuff in the jars as well. In fact, like this might be a good way, these mud jars, any kind of burial item is a good way to communicate some story, right? Because we get a chance to showcase a little bit about who the people that once used this location were and what they were like. So we already know that this whole site has a bit of an esoteric, like magical vibe to it. And so I think it'd be really cool if maybe we put some like urns with the muddy ashes of former shamans or something that once used this site. And it could contain, like Diablo/Tat said, one of these jars could contain the mud golem. Like some could contain treasure. And that's what you always want to give players some good stuff and some bad stuff. Like you don't want to have everything be punitive. I think someone referred to it once as the don't touch museum. Like you don't want your dungeon to be the don't touch museum. You want to make it, you keep the players a little off balance. Like put really cool treasure in a jar, and then in the next jar put like a big muddy hand that comes out and tries to suffocate them by like plunging down their throat or something, So like a cool trap. So I think that room, when we design it, is going to be a mixture of trap and treasure. So trap and treasure, TNT. I hope people actually know what that means. TNT, trap and treasure. Cool. So there we are. We got stuck. We knew we needed a room to sort of button out the pacing a little bit so that we're not cattle sliding. And we went back to our thematic ideas and came up with a really interesting room idea that's a little bit of an encounter, yes, but I wouldn't say it's so big of one that it's going to cut into our time slots, Really nice, really great. So I might challenge the chat to help me come up with something for this other room up here. Let's see what we've got. This one right here, which is another sort of pacing room. Let me see what our chat's saying. Undead mud warriors. Oh yeah, trinket tables are really useful in the D&D books. Yes, trinket tables are always great to roll on. Also, this is worth mentioning. I had put this in our notes right here on the notes. When I'm trying to brainstorm ideas like cats in the jar, which by the way, I'm going to put in bold here, cat in the jar, because that's a very important concept. When I'm trying to brainstorm ideas like that and I'm feeling stuck, I always turn to my trusty tome of adventure design right here. I've got it right here, yes. And some pages I really, really find useful in coming up with room ideas are some of the ones I have listed here. So page 13 is actually, it talks about how to, like, an overall purpose for a dungeon. Like, it's actually like more like broad scope, it's for the whole dungeon. But I actually find that it's really useful to roll on that table for room ideas as well. And just, just to throw out a real quick example, if you were to roll on that table, you might get a result like the entropy farm. I just grabbed the entropy farm, and I mean, that could be its own room. In fact, I just came up with an idea for a room based on that. I think that, I know Scott had mentioned mushrooms earlier, and I wonder if like this room right here could be like the rot room of mushrooms, entropy farm. That would be rot, and that would be a field of mushrooms. So rot room, mushrooms. There's going to be something weird going on with the mushrooms in there. Again, a little bit of TNT going on, a little bit of trap and treasure. Like, make it so that the characters can get a benefit, but also if they push their luck too far, it could turn into a bad situation for them as well. Like, maybe some of these mushrooms provide a little bit of healing or insight or a little boost, but if you eat too many of them, something bad happens. So, just as an example. Okay, back to our planning. Is there anything in this room required to progress through the rest of the dungeon? Oh, DP, I'm glad you asked that question because that brings up an important point. I think that when you're designing a dungeon that essentially requires the characters to get to the end in order to complete the dungeon, so we're talking about an episodic style one-shot. I'm not talking about like a mega dungeon that characters might have whole sections of the dungeon they choose not to explore, which is more like an old school style for sure. In a contained adventure where there's sort of a concluding event, which is the fight with or confrontation with the hounds, we don't want to necessarily impede the progress of the players to the point that they can't get past it. So what I mean by that is, like, we don't want to like say that you have to get the key from this room to unlock this door and there's no other way through. What we want to do is instead try to develop the dungeon into an organic, explorable location where maybe if the characters took like 5 of the correct turns in a row, they might wind up at the boss battle right away, but that'd be extremely unlikely. You want to kind of create an organic environment with the map that's going to allow the characters to explore, but not be funneled and not be blocked simply because they didn't achieve a story goal that you put elsewhere in the dungeon. So keys and stuff are cool if they lead to something that is not a requirement to complete the dungeon. That is my take on it. That's my opinion. So, all right. Writing mega dungeons. One day I will do it. I've had one cooking around in my head, you guys, and drawing the maps and stuff for mega dungeons is a whole different, I think it's actually an entirely different technique even than what I'm teaching you guys right now for a one-shot. Maybe we'll do a separate video about mega dungeons someday, once I have more to show on that front for you guys. But, okay. Now, let's jump back to our outline. Let's see. Outline. And our room ideas. Yes, our room ideas are very important. So far, we've hit a few points. We've got entrance room. Kind of got an idea for that. Narrow hallway, yep. We haven't done the esoteric altar room. And so maybe one thing we can do here now is sort of bring that loop we created back around to the esoteric altar room. So something still has to go in here. We don't know what it's going to be, but this is going to be number 3, altar room. Oh, wow. Watching me write words with the mouse is going to be, there we go, altar room. Here we still don't know. Altar room can be here. And then I think from the altar room, what else do we need to do here? We've got the altar room. We've got another hallway network, a maze. I think that would be cool to kind of do off of here, like a maze. Probably like multiple routes, right? That'd be kind of cool. And then like a boss battle room. So this is a little bit of a cattle slide, I will say, but you know what we can do? So let's make the maze like a kind of like a bunch of different little nodes, right? Like cool little things to encounter. They all connect to each other. You know, maybe we can do something like that, right? I know it looks kind of crazy, but we're having like little hits of interesting things here. And then maybe like one of these could actually lead off to the big boss room. And then here's one more little thing. Just to make this dungeon more interconnected and to encourage exploration, I think that it would be neat to make a secret passage that goes into here, into the network of stuff. And we can revisit this idea, like maybe it actually goes into the altar room instead, because we don't want players to just skip the entire dungeon, but maybe we can make this a difficult path of some kind. But what our goal here is to encourage exploration and to make it so that the players have multiple avenues through our supposed dungeon. And even though we don't know what it all is going to be yet, we can pull from our ideas, like our thematic ideas and our room ideas, and start to fill out the missing pieces, and also make sure that, you know, we're hitting our other room ideas for pacing here. Let's jump back to here for a second, to our outline. And makes us, you know, see what we haven't covered yet. So we haven't really thought too hard about a room with this NPC. We did do the pit of bone spikes, right? Yep, the pit is number 2. Oh wait, the entrance. This is gonna be, yeah, the entrance is the skeleton door. I kind of misnumbered this, so I don't know if I can correct this, but we're gonna do entrances 2. Boop. Pit is 3. Get rid of that number. Altar is 4. I mean, I might be messing this up. Let's look here. Oh yeah, I'm totally messing this up. Okay, the numbering does not matter because we're going to be changing this as we go. But we've got our skeleton door, our pit. This is always the part where I definitely have to sit and think the most. You know, this is like fast forward through this section of me sitting here staring at the screen thinking. But, we still haven't dealt with the NPC. We've got a sort of combat situation with the altar. We've got the navigation part. So I'm gonna write in here that this was our navigation part. Nav. And then this is gonna be the boss. Boss. Cool. So I guess this would be our room where we would want to put the NPC. You know, the NPC interaction. And this goes along with our pacing that we were establishing, right? Because we've got the entrance with the skeleton door. Pit, yep, a thing, 2 kind of cats in the jar situations, NPC, altar, navigation, boss. So there we are. Like, honestly, this might even be great. This might be enough because we have some, again, this is just a one-shot, so we don't want to make this a crazy complex map. There are going to be multiple paths that one could take through this, and I feel like the boss battle is isolated enough away from the body of the adventure so that most groups aren't gonna just run straight to it, although it will happen. Anything can happen, but as long as statistically it's very unlikely, and as long as we're giving characters reasons to want to explore the other rooms as they pass them, it's likely that this adventure will see a fair amount of exploration during it. So let me look at our comments where we're at so far. So, oh, I'm so glad that you're learning more about dungeon mapping in this video than reading lots of posts on the matter. That's great to hear. And, you know, it's simple because or it's not simple, I should say, but it's deceptive because drawing circles and lines to visualize sort of the course of a dungeon and pairing your room ideas to it, for me, has been completely the most essential part of planning out a dungeon. And I think that I used to get stuck in the trap of trying to kind of put the cart before the horse, where I would be trying to design the actual look and specifics of each room as I went. And getting specific is a whole different step. And that's actually what we're going to talk about in our next live stream, is now making and tuning encounters for each of these rooms. But we still have a little bit of time left, so I want a quick touch on how we would convert this network of circles and lines into an actual mappy looking thing. So I probably am not going to have time to actually sit down and draw a map on the stream right now. But what I would essentially do here now is, either bust out some graph paper or some blank paper and start to refine the shape and look of each of these circles and lines. So what I would next do is, draw a slightly more realistic looking version, still not on grid, like literally just on blank paper. And I would say, okay, this entrance room right here is going to be, roughly 30 by 30 and round and jagged because it's a cave. And that's it. And then I would say, all right, and then this next room is going to have, a windy sort of jagged tunnel. It's probably not going to be a straight tunnel. It's probably going to be a little curvy, so the characters can't just look straight down it and be like, what's in that room? They have to actually go and look. And then it's going to turn into maybe this time a bit of a longer room. Maybe there's a little bit of elevation in there. Maybe there's like some mounds or hills with all these mushrooms growing on it. So I'll draw little representations of what that might be. Nothing specific yet. And the same for all these other rooms. Mud jar room. What would that look like? Well, if other people came here and actually put these mud jars in this room, maybe this room has a little more construction to it. Like maybe shored up a little bit with some like old planks or some old stone structures that communicates the fact that, yes, people used to use this room. And so I would probably incorporate maybe a little bit more of square, blocky looking elements to this room as built architecture. And so that's where I would go along with each of these rooms, imagining, why was this room used? What might it look like because of that? And, roughly speaking, is it going to be jagged? Is it going to be round? Is it going to be triangular? It's not so important to worry about the exact details, but rather to get a general shape and have a little bit of variety. It can feel forced at times to be like, well, I can't have this room be square because that room was square. But it does matter in the long run to try to have a little bit of variety. Like, you don't want every room to be the same size and same shape. You want to variate it up a little bit. And you will usually find a good reason to, based on what the room's purpose is anyway. So that's something that you can dive into. And what I'll do between now and the next time is I will actually draw out like another 2 drafts. Like I'll try to take this room up to like a mid-level draft, like I'm just talking about, and then to a finished sort of rough draft of a dungeony looking thing so I can share it out. And I will include that. I'll actually put a link to that in the notes once I have it done over the next couple days, but I'm not going to make you guys sit here and watch me draw, like, hum to myself, like, and draw a map. But, what is this $5 version of Sketchpad? Oh, I've never used this before. I actually don't know what Sketchpad is. So it's definitely the free one. I am a newbie to it. So let's see. That's what we'll do. I think that the thing we'll cover next time is a bit more about how I polished the map up to a final result, because what we just did, you guys, is we designed it. We actually just designed the map. The design part is the deciding the pacing, deciding why something's going to look this way and how it's going to connect to the other stuff. So all that would be left would be rendering and kind of drawing out a rough version of it, which again might change as we continue to develop the adventure. So it's still all in pencil. And I think that's where we are for today. I want to make sure your notes are complete here. I'm going to add a couple steps here. So number 1, lines and circles. Vague, general relationships between rooms. Remember to keep pacing by having a few extra rooms slotted in that aren't super encountery, or maybe it's better to say that aren't full encounters, but encourage poking around. Trap and treasure. Have a bit of both. Encourage looking. Don't make a don't touch museum. Museum. Oh, JP Coubert is in here. What? You're the coolest. The best map maker ever was watching this. Oh man, that's super exciting. Thank you. All right. And then the last thing, number 3, is that the next step that you want to take is once you have the network, make sure there are interconnected rooms, some circular movement, not a cattle slide. And then for next time, make another slightly more specific version of this map. Shape general of rooms, general size, a bit of detail, elevation, features. And then we want to say consider, whoops, I scrolled real far. Is the room for built by people or natural? Are there hazards? Are there, are there reasons to have a specific shape? Try to make the shapes have variety. And then finally, for next time, turn the second draft into something even more specific that looks like a real dungeon, even on graph paper at this point. But know that it will change further as we develop, so don't do any inking yet. There we are. So let me jump into our questions here. I'm going to share these notes out with you guys. I'm going to clean them up a little bit, and I'll get you guys these steps 4 and 5, which we didn't get a chance to cover because it would be silly to watch me just draw on a map for however long. I am definitely not as entertaining to watch drawing as JP Coubert. I am terrible at it. So I want to check your questions. Now let's see, I use fruits to describe room shapes. That's a great idea, using fruits to describe room shapes. That's really great. Banana shape, pear shape, yeah, that's wonderful. And let me see, would I use historical reality to design a room? Would I use something literal to inform your rooms? Yes, in some cases, yes. Now, one thing that I would avoid doing is making rooms that mimic real architecture super closely. And by super closely, I mean to the point of having like bathrooms and like storage closets and like lots of utilitarian things, because while some dungeons will have some of that stuff for sure, like most dungeons will have a kitchen and there's going to be something fun to look at in the kitchen, I would also it's not necessarily, fantasy gaming isn't about making totally true to life maps and locations, because we hit a point where realism becomes uninteresting and realism conflicts with fun. The same is true with the same is true with the rules of D&D. If there was a rule to dictate every single tiny action that you might take in order to make it realistic, the game itself would actually be kind of boring. So we use a little bit of abstraction with the maps to bring in realistic feeling elements without making them actually look like architectural blueprints, because those aren't that fun to explore, quite honestly. And so I have definitely looked at real architecture for inspiration, but I have tried to cut out and focus in on the things that are the most stand out about those buildings and not actually make a real copy of those buildings, you know, because they wouldn't again be very fun to explore. And that's why we are developing the dungeon alongside the map once we have some idea of encounters, because these encounters are telling us what is important to include, and it gives us an idea of what is not necessary to go too far into. Like, if we didn't come up with a fun encounter that takes place in a bathroom, we probably don't need to include 5 bathrooms then in the castle, you know? Maybe one, maybe we can put a cat in the jar situation in a bathroom in a flash of inspiration, but you know, we don't need a bunch of them. So it always annoys me when the map doesn't include a toilet. I do think about that. I know I have included toilets. There have been times I haven't, and I've laughed, like, I wonder what they do with this stuff, but you know, chamber pots, and I guess, but so that is one thing, is real world inspiration is excellent. Like, in fact, right now I'm drawing a map that's completely inspired by Knossos, which is this really, really cool Bronze Age temple on Crete. And totally look it up. It's so cool. When you look at this thing, you have to, like, you see it as a D&D location. It's so awesome. So yeah, like, real places are very inspiring, and looking at their architecture can give you cool ideas. So that's what I would say. Does the chat have any other questions right now about this process? Is there any point where you feel like imagine yourself like getting stuck taking this from concept to more concrete? I don't know, because I find mapping to be one of the hardest parts of D&D writing. That's just me. I struggle. I always struggle. So perhaps not, but hey, if you have a comment, if you catch this video afterwards and you want to throw a question in the comments, I will do my best to answer, and I will do my best to get you the downloads of these more rendered versions of this map once I get them on paper for you all. I'll try to do that between today and tomorrow. So there we are. That was almost an hour even. Look how good we are at sticking to 1 hour. We're just so good at this. And catch me next time. Next time we're gonna be doing some actual nitty-gritty design, and we're getting close to this being done. You know, I don't know if you guys can feel it in your bones, but after doing this map and having some encounter ideas, I feel like we could actually sit down and crank out some serious writing on this. And so the next things that we focus on are gonna be about the writing process, how to write effective encounters, interesting encounters, and how to communicate those successfully. We'll touch on a little bit of layout down the road, where to source art, and we might even touch a bit on how to actually go about publishing if you decide you want to put this final product of yours up. So that's it. And yeah, don't work too hard on the drawing right now. It's all loosey-goosey still. It's going to become concrete by the end, but it's a process. It's not something you just sit down and slam out and boom, it's done. It's going to develop. So do I think historically, how is this built by whom? Yes, Rangdo, you could totally, and you want to do that. Thinking historically about each room can help you decide what it looks like. You know, why is this room here? Because it was used as a training ground for warriors. Well, that already gives you some ideas of what to make it look like then. So there we are. All right, you all, have a good rest of your Sunday. And I will catch you guys next time we do one of these. Should be in a few weeks at the most. So thanks, everybody. Have a good rest of the day. Bye.